Hi, I'm Marjorie DeHey, the General Manager for MEF, the Global Community for Mobile Commerce and Mobile Content. I'm here with Gary Schwartz, our North American Chairperson.
Absolutely, and what's so exciting is we're here in Washington discussing privacy, this is where it's happening. I mean, obviously everything happens nationally with mobile, and we're talking about lots of things, but really what we feel is going to be an obstacle for adoption in the world of mobile, especially with areas of content and commerce, is that trust factor with the consumer. And so we're here in Washington discussing with the FTC and other key stakeholders really how we should proceed to deal with consumer trust and the issues of privacy around apps going forward.
Yes, I thought one of the interesting comments we heard this morning is the Federal Reserve Board says that most people, majority of consumers, think that mobile commerce is going to happen, it's going to be the wave of the future, it will happen in 5 years. But a minority think that they personally are going to be using mobile commerce. How do we bridge that gap as an industry?
Well, you know, I think that the problem is that, you know, a lot of people have a perception of what mobile is, and you know how they can interact with the phone, and in the future how they will be interacting with the phone. And there's a big divide between what people think mobile has to offer them, you know, from a convenience perspective, and from a trust perspective, and what the real reality is. And people are still sort of groping in the dark a bit. And what the industry really needs to do is take a proactive stance and not be reactive, not wait until somebody, you know, cries uncle and says, "Oh my gosh, I interact with an app and you know, it invaded my privacy." The industry needs to, and this is absolutely what the FTC is saying here, is there needs to be transparency. There has to be a clear explanation of what you're doing on the phone, and then that divide narrows, and that's really what you know, MEF is going to be focused on in the upcoming year, is making it clear, and the whole industry, and MEF represents the key stakeholders, you know, can sing Kumbaya together with the same standards, the same iconography, the same simplification of T's and C's.
Well, let's talk about that, because is it consumers' trust? I don't trust my mobile phone to make a payment, or hey, it's a real pain to try to make a payment on the mobile phone. You think it's consumer trust or ease of use? Well,
you know, it is a tough balance, because in order to have the convenience of one-click action, one-click commerce, you know, one-click activity in a content environment, you have to ask that consumer to give you a bit of data that you hold in order to facilitate that simplicity on the small screen. And so it's a balance between the convenience you expect on the phone and the trust to give the data that's required for that convenience. So you know, if you can explain to the consumer that by giving up X, they get Y, and there's a trade and balance, and it's all very clear and simple, and there's no sort of spooking the consumer after the fact, then I think we'll advance things a lot more aggressively, and that's really what I'm hearing in the room. And you need to have a trade organization that can represent everybody, who can lay out those guidelines so everybody's looking at the same, you know, the same rule book.
Absolutely. I think one of the key points that the Federal Trade Commission made is you're collecting all this data, it's from consumers, but they don't really know how that data is going to be used. And I think it's part of a consumer education to tell them, hey, if we're collecting data, we're going to use it this way. Their concern is we're collecting data and we're going to use it this way. So really, that balance as an industry, who do you think's doing a good job? How can we get better?
Well, I think everybody's trying to do a good job, and I think that everybody who's in the value chain knows that if they screw up, they're not getting another shot at consumer trust. So everybody's trying to do the right thing. What's interesting is some of the discussion around just being frank. Maybe it shouldn't be a discussion on privacy. Maybe it should be a discussion on data usage, for example. You know, maybe it's a little Orwellian to talk about privacy guidelines, where it's really not about discussion about privacy. It's a discussion on the use of somebody's data. And so maybe call a horse a horse. There needs to be clarity for the consumer, and that's really where we have to head.
I think the clarity is a great point, because somebody was saying in the room, consumers don't read. And when they read, they don't always comprehend. So I think one of the key issues that we were talking about earlier is Google announces privacy change, big media blitz, etc. Oh my God, privacy, etc., where they really didn't change their privacy rules or restrictions. They just consolidated them. Basically on the same day, Apple says, we just made $1 gazillion, and they have really almost across the board, can use your information in so many different ways that the consumer is not aware of. So it's, how do we deal with that? Because consumers tell their whole life on Facebook, but then are worried that one piece of data is going to be misused.
Look, I think that, in sum, it's a very powerful device. It does a lot. What it is it's a personal device. And I think that when people speak about it, when people talk about what they're doing with that device, people get concerned. And so what that's leading the industry to do is not talk about it, which is not a good thing. So, Google, by standardizing things, did a good, it made good efforts to standardize and make things transparent for the consumer.
Yeah.
We have to encourage companies to do that and to be proactive. And as I say, by simplifying the way that they do that, by doing complying with a standard that everybody works to, they won't be as reticent to engage, talk about these issues with the consumer, and advance the industry. So I think in sum, we go back to that Warhol who immortalized that quote, people don't read. We need to simplify it, we need to create iconography, and we need to have standards. And that's what MEF is going to be doing for the next year as we move forward from this initial launch of privacy.